we doing, Mandela? If you can hear me clap, what's that one? Thank you. You'll get it. You'll get it. All right, folks, thank you very much. I'm hopeful that everybody had a good day. And it looks like we did. I see happy faces. I know our IGEI folks were doing consulting projects today. And I enjoyed my group, and I hear that we've got good projects like going to college, animal health, who else? PBS, lots of projects. Okay. And Mandela Fellows, good to see everybody. How are we doing?
Good.
Good?
Super good.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We had an amazing.
Always good.
So tonight's a special night, and I want to give you a little bit of an introduction before we get going with our keynote speaker, who is Dr. Mark Speicher, my good friend and an exceptional professional in the healthcare industry. A couple of things for you tonight. This is the beginning soft launch of our Executive Fellow Speaker Series at the Institute. This is a new initiative that we're doing. We're weaving Executive Fellows of the Institute who are subject matter experts, who are distinguished professionals in their field. Typically, they have terminal degrees, and they're in executive leadership roles, meaning they're in the chief or C-suite of the organizations that they represent. These are individuals that add content to our global program. And in particular, these are individuals who are addressing significant, complex challenges that are important to all of us. So Dr. Speicher, in the healthcare arena, will be talking about a number of things, some of which may include the education of the healthcare professionals of the future, or some of the challenges in health that we face. But these are the big issues. The speakers that we bring in for this speaker series are worried about the things that we're all worried about together. So Dr. Speicher is first, and this is, as I said, an important part of our process. For the Mandela Fellows, as you know, Dr. Speicher is also a focus coach with you. For those, a couple of you focused on health, and for IGEI, he's serving as one of your clients through the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. So we're getting a lot of great return here from Dr. Speicher. So a little bit about Dr. Speicher before I start. So he serves as the Senior Vice President for Learning, Innovation, and Research. And I think, Mark, we've known each other now for 5 or 6 years. Yeah. Time flies. We've done some interesting projects together, some of which he may mention to you tonight. In addition to this senior executive role at a National Association level position, he's also been a professor and associate dean at a medical school. He's been the president of an organization called MedSpectrum. He's been executive director for Arizona Board of Medical Examiners, and also a vice president in the Baptist Hospital and Health Systems. So he brings a wealth of experience to the conversation tonight. For any of those in the audience, American, international, African, if you are a baseball fan, show me your hands just for a minute. American baseball. So there's one thing I'm sorry to tell you about Dr. Speicher. Dr. Speicher, albeit a great gentleman and a true executive leader, he roots for the wrong baseball team. He likes Arizona. It's very sad. Very sad. He does not appreciate he's in Philadelphia Phillies country, which we'll talk about when we have the minor league baseball. We're doing that soon. That's coming soon. So if you could, please give a warm welcome for Dr. Speicher. And folks, this session is being recorded so that we we can share this with our alumni, and we'll be able to give you excerpts of this. So our operations officer back there, Eduardo, is recording this, so just so everyone's aware. Thank you.
Many of you might know that there is a part of old man culture here in the United States where we tell our children, our families, our descendants that we had to walk to school in the snow uphill both ways, just to show how hard we had it and how much harder we had it than you had, right? Lehigh is the first place I've ever been to where everything is actually uphill both ways. So that's what I've been doing today, is walking up a ladder. And I am truly grateful to be here. I think that we should try and start our days in gratitude, and today I get to end my day in gratitude. I am so grateful for the fellow fellows that I met yesterday, and especially those that I get to work with. I am so grateful for the IPEI students that I met today, and especially those I get to work with. I'm grateful for Scott for bringing me here, and I hope that I can share a little bit about what I've learned in trying to make healthier communities for the past almost 40 years, right? So it's really an honor to be here with you today. We are in so many crises that it is hard to sort them all out. We have a political division crisis in this country. We have a climate crisis around the world. We have a healthcare crisis. We have a healthcare crisis that involves access to care, the cost of the care that we get, and the quality of the care that we receive. It's bad for our healthcare providers, and it's bad for our communities. But I hope that I will leave you with the vision that if this is your passion, if this is your interest, there is something that you can do about this today. All right? So we're going to talk about where we are and how does that compare with where we want to be. We're going to talk about how we can get more healthcare providers. We're going to talk about other ways of improving the health of our community besides getting more healthcare providers, although that is absolutely necessary. And I hope you're going to take away some things that you specifically can do, right? So let's talk about the healthcare crisis, leaving aside all the other crises that we all have to deal with. Our health is getting worse. So this is U.S. mortality data, right? And this is life expectancy. Life expectancy has stopped increasing and has started decreasing. All right? That means if this trend continues, it is unlikely that you will live as long as your parents. And that is something that has not happened in this country before. It has happened in some other countries, but generally internationally, the trend has been the same. And unfortunately, that trend is the same now. This is mortality. So this is life expectancy. This is mortality. So in this one, going up is good. In this slide, going down is good. Mortality going down is good. Right? And so all-cause mortality has been going up. That bump in 2020 is, as you all know, the COVID pandemic, but it has not gone back down. Right? It has not gone back down. So, what are the gaps between where we are now, that we've just seen, and where we want to be? Right? So, let's talk about the gaps caused by inequities. Right? You are all familiar with the inequities listed on this slide. Income, education, job insecurity, working conditions, food insecurity, housing, early childhood development, inclusivity, structural conflict, and access to affordable care. That information in the little gray box there was based on a study in Indonesia. These problems are the same around the world, just the order in which they impact our health changes. They all impact our health, and the bigger the inequity, the more the negative impact. Measuring things, though, allows us to try to change them. As a statistical methodologist and evaluator, measuring things is always the first step. Right? So as I take you through some measures today, some of them will be measures of problems, but some of them will be measures of successes. And so we're going to take those measures all together, and we're going to decide how to move forward as a local community, as a global community. Right? So take a moment just to think, what are the gaps in your community? However you define it, what are some of those gaps? And just to remind you, there's the list of gaps. What if we did the Indonesia study in your community, what order would those gaps be in? What would be the most impactful on the health of your community? In the US, one of the biggest gaps we have is that we don't have enough physicians. This is an estimate done by the Association of American Medical Colleges, which is our sister organization who works with the MD schools and the MD students. In the US, there are two pathways to becoming a physician that we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a minute. The first pathway is to go to a medical school that grants an MD degree. About 3/4 of students go to an MD granting medical school in the US. About 25% of the medical students in the US go to a DO, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, granting institution in the US. Once they graduate from medical school, both MD and DO students go to the same residency programs, and they can practice in the same communities, in the same hospitals, in the same specialties. This is a gap of both MD and DO physicians. So as statisticians, we do estimates with error ranges. So this error range is a big one because it's a far distant prediction for 2036. Right? More than 10 years from now, somewhere between 13,000 and 86,000 physicians. We will be short between 13,000 and 86,000 physicians. If you live in a rural area, the shortage will be much worse. If you live in a rural area, the shortage will be much worse. The same shortage exists internationally. And as this chart shows, it exists for many different kinds of healthcare providers. So the same features of the communities that make it harder for rural areas to attract physicians in the US make it harder for rural areas internationally, globally, to attract physicians. And so again, this is worse in rural areas. This shortage is worse in rural areas. In addition to being overworked because there aren't enough healthcare providers anywhere, Our healthcare providers are unwell. They have emotional injuries that they suffer every day, right? Because, as you know, they deal with sick people. They deal with people who are not at their best. They deal with people who die. They deal with families who have to cope with it, right? So they are emotionally not well. In addition to the injuries of their job, the moral injuries of their job, they work in a system that doesn't support them. If you're familiar with the U.S. healthcare system, you know that our system has a great administrative burden for physicians and others. And so after they're done dealing with a patient who might be truly suffering and have the emotional impact of helping to bear that suffering, they have to deal with the administrative web that is the healthcare system. And they are feeling it. They are feeling it. And what happens when they are suffering? They leave practice. They do something else. They're smart people. They can do other things. Right? So not only are we not making enough doctors, but we are losing the ones we have. So as you can see, that's the bottom, on the graph on your far right. So that top line is physicians, that bottom line is the general population. The first graph is burnout. So the top graph is burnout. The second graph is job satisfaction. Okay? It's a global problem, not just a U.S. problem. Keeping our healthcare providers and keeping them healthy is a problem everywhere. Burnout prevalence from 42% to 47% from 2021 to 2022 in the U.S. among physicians. Almost half of our physicians are actively burned out right now. In Canada, a survey of 4,000 physicians and residents, which are medical learners who have already graduated from medical school but still have additional training to do in a clinical setting. 53% have experienced high levels of burnout in 2021 compared to only 30% in 2017. Right? In Britain, 80% of doctors were at a high or very high risk of burnout, with students and residents most at risk. That was before COVID. The largest Chinese physicians online community reported that more than 2/3 of Chinese physicians were suffering from burnout. And a meta-analysis of 22,000 learners from 10 different countries showed that more than half of them are burned out right now. So again, we're not making enough physicians, and the ones we have, number one, are in danger of poor performance, because that's one of the side effects of being burned out at a job. And poor performance means they are doing worse than they could do taking care of patients. That's what poor performance means for a physician. Right? And we are in danger of having these physicians leave the profession. At ATOM, the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, where I work, we did our own study of what medical school does to medical students. We did a survey of entering students and graduating students in the same academic year. So academic year 2022-2023, we did a survey of entering students, graduating students. We used some well-established, validated measures of burnout and psychological symptoms. And what did we find? Entering students have a relatively high burnout score. graduating students have a score that is 3/4 of a point higher. So medical school earns you money. Psychological symptoms. We gave a standardized test of self-reported psychological symptoms. These are serious psychological symptoms. Anxiety, lack of sleep, depression, suicidal ideation. Okay? Entering students had a concerning score. Graduating students, on average, had a very concerning score. And so just to summarize what we found, 10% of the students who had not yet started class were already burned out. Incoming medical students across the board averaged 2.26 out of 5 on a burnout scale. 48% of incoming medical students say they sometimes or often feel like they don't belong in medical school. We chose a cut point on the survey of psychological symptoms based on a study that was printed in Nature, the journal Nature. Almost 30% of our entering students had concerning psychological symptoms before they started their first class in medical school. That's bad. But it's even worse that 57% of our graduating students had psychological symptoms in the concerning range as we start them in residency. And what happens between medical school and residency? We go from seeing patients under close supervision to seeing patients independently. Right? So that is a very important transition in a physician's life, and they are experiencing burnout and severe psychological symptoms at that transition. So we're going to talk about how to get more healthcare providers and then how to get healthier. All right? So ACOM represents, as I said, 41 colleges of osteopathic medicine at 66 sites across the U.S. We train 27% of all medical students. Those little orange dots are where our schools are. Osteopathic medicine is different than allopathic medicine because it's based on a philosophy. And the philosophy is the osteopathic tenets. So ACOM envisions a world where everyone can choose to receive osteopathic care, and we're going to make sure that everyone has access to a physician, specifically an osteopathic physician. That's our goal. That's our mission. That's our vision for the future. Right? So you can see there in that orange box, those are the tenets or the core philosophies of osteopathic medicine. Right? The person is a unit of mind, body, and spirit. The body is capable of self-regulation and self-healing. Structure and function. So the structure of a body organ is related to the function of that organ. And problems in the performance of the organ are likely related to problems in the structure. Right? The structural problem of the organ. And that rational treatment is based on those principles. That's the osteopathic philosophy. Not very different than what many of you have experienced if you've experienced good medical care, whether from an MD or from a DO. Right? Our schools are growing fast, and our number of students are growing faster. I joke with people that if we were a stock, you would buy us. Right? If our job is to make more physicians, we're doing a pretty good job. We also, though, have to keep our physicians healthy. Right? We have to keep them healthy because they are important to the communities where they serve. 57% of DOs practice in primary care fields. So you're likely, if you go to a family medicine physician, if you go to an internist, if you go to a pediatrician, you're likely to see a DO. Right? And whether primary care or specialist, they are more likely than their MD colleagues to practice in a rural area. Right? So our graduates serve the underserved. So, how do we improve the health of our communities, knowing that our physicians are at risk? We're at risk of not having enough. We're at risk of not having healthy ones who then need the promotion. Right? There's two things I want to talk with you about. The first one is changing the community's role in the education of health professionals. And the second of it is about changing what's important to us in our communities. When medical education started, this is what it looked like. There was a medical school inside a big hospital, and that was the trunk of the health provider tree. So from that tree stemmed a faculty of physicians that you could go see at that academic medical center. A lot of research that was going on at that academic medical center to help heal you, cure you, explore diseases that were not understood well. Medical education of residents and fellows. After they graduated, they would do their residency program right there in that hospital. And some community health programs for the community immediately surrounding the medical school. Right? That's what medical education used to look like. In the 1980s, health systems, health insurance companies started buying the physician faculty plans at medical schools. So while they don't own the medical schools now, they own the physicians that practice at those medical schools. And so the health plan is the trunk of the tree. And medical schools, the residents, the funded research, because a lot of those physicians now go out to extramural funding to do the research that they do. That all brings in money that funnels down to the health plan. Where's the community? It's not really important. This is what we envision as the healthcare system of tomorrow, where the community is the foundation of medical education, of research for what health problems exist in that community, and healthcare provided to members of the community, and of course the economic development that comes with having physicians, having researchers, having other healthcare providers in your community. There's a big economic impact of opening a medical school, opening a hospital, bringing in physician workers to your community. We think that communities will be responsible for developing the healthcare providers that they need. I talked a little bit about this with my ITEI students earlier today. We are at a inflection point in history, right? We started with an agrarian economy. If you pay attention in your economics classes, you learned about this. We started with an agrarian economy. We moved to an industrialized economy, right? That was a big migration to the cities, to factories. We believe now we have moved from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy, right? Where information, where data, where the ability to manipulate, transmit, and use data is the most important part of the economy. Pretty soon, though, I believe that changes in the use of artificial intelligence, changes in the way we use data, changes in the way we automate different processes, will mean that we are moving to a relationship economy, where what you do won't be valued mostly by what you know or how you use that information or how you use data. It's going to be valued by your ability to create good feelings. Feelings of optimism, feelings of hope, feelings of engagement, feelings of belonging, feelings of love. If you look at what's happening in healthcare now, specialties like radiology, pathology, more and more of those decisions, looking at a slide and seeing what's on the slide, looking at an x-ray and seeing what's on the x-ray, more and more of those decisions are being automated. Specialties that are increasing in importance are those specialties that depend on relationships. Your family's physician, your oncologist if you have cancer, right? That you have trust that not only does someone know what's wrong with you and how to take care of you, but they care about whether or not you're going to get better. Right? They care about whether or not you're going to get better. That's the key feature of the feelings economy. That you are supporting someone else to have positive feelings. So keeping that in mind, right? Spending $1 on a medical school for your community, spending $1 for a hospital in your community is not the only way to improve the health of your community. Right? I think we've all seen the impact of financial assets on health. People who have higher incomes, people who have more wealth, live longer, live healthier lives. Why? Because they can afford basic needs. They can afford better food. They can afford access to education and healthcare, things that uplift their lives. Right? So maybe, giving every baby $1,000 is the best way to improve that baby's health. Right? Maybe doing something to guarantee a minimum income for those in your community is the best way to improve the health of your community. So we have to think outside the healthcare system, outside the healthcare box, about how to improve the health of our communities. Likewise, physical assets. Physical assets are infrastructure, right? So do you live in a walkable community? Do you live in a community with transportation so that you can get to your doctor's appointments? Do you live in a community where you can afford a house? Right? The access to physical assets is an important predictor of your health, of your lifespan.